FM, The Source.
All right, 6 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination was April 4th.
Yes.
What year was that? 69? I can't remember. But anyway, this Wednesday is the anniversary of that day.
I think it was 68. I think it was 58.
And, you know, we have come a long way, but every time you turn around on the news, when you hear about some unarmed black man who's been shot and killed, and you don't know all the details, and I know every story is different, but I always have to worry and wonder. The story about here locally in was it? Oh gosh, where was that Zimmerman case? Was that DeLand?
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, DeLand.
DeLand. My opinion, I totally think that was unnecessary. I totally think Zimmerman should have been found guilty. I know a lot of you disagree with that, but anyway, there is a book I want to tell you about. It's called Policing Black Bodies. If you're looking at the podcast, you're seeing the cover of the book. On the phone are the authors, Dr. Angela Hattery and Dr. Earl Smith. Dr. Hattery is a professor and director of women and gender studies at George Mason University, an expert in race, gender, violence, and the criminal justice system, and the understanding of dynamics of family violence, etc. I'm sorry, I'm just going through this as fast as I can. Dr. Earl Smith is a professor of sociology at George Mason, also an expert in race, gender, violence, and the criminal justice system. Similar career paths, it looks like. The dynamics of race and sport. Dr. Hattery and Dr. Smith, good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Sorry I took so long, but you guys have a lot of credentials.
Thank you.
Where's Earl? Is he with you?
Oh,
there you are. Okay. Where are you right now?
We're in Fairfax, Virginia.
Oh, okay. So tell me about your thoughts about what's happening in the world today. And is it uniquely American, or is this something we're seeing in England and other places? Hello?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. I do think in some ways it's uniquely American. For a couple of reasons. One, we all know this. We've been talking about the gun debate since the tragic shooting in Parkland, but before that in Sandy Hook. But the other thing is, you know, we're pretty much the only country that has embedded in our Constitution, slavery and the exploitation of black bodies as their dispensability when, they're doing something. You mentioned George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. If a black person is not where, quote, they're supposed to be, they're dispensable.
Okay, is that, I mean, I don't see it that way. I mean, but what you're saying is some people do see it that way.
Yes, I'm not suggesting everybody sees it that way, but
Okay.
I'm suggesting that because it's sort of embedded in the Constitution, when it does happen, again, you mentioned the case of Trayvon Martin, but you could mention many, many others. The white,
Right.
It's almost always a white person, is never held accountable. So, that tells us something about.
Doctor, where is it embedded in the Constitution? I'm not clear that I know that.
Well, I should back up. Perhaps not written literally in the Constitution, but it requires the 14th Amendment, right, to undo the slave.
Oh, that part, yes, absolutely.
bedrock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, some of your listeners might be familiar with the 13th Amendment, which preserves the right to engage in, to hold, quote, people as slaves and engage in slave labor when they're incarcerated.
Right.
So that still remains in the Constitution, the clause in the 13th Amendment.
Okay, so that is all undone in the middle of the 19th century. Why are the remnants of that still around? I guess that's the more of a philosophical question, I guess.
Well, the same why the remnants of the Second Amendment is around. If you go back and read it, and most people don't, it has nothing to do with all the uproar about I got to keep my gun. It is just a total falsehood of taking what's written there and applying it to 20th, 21st century America. It doesn't work. And yet the ideology is, oh, this thing applies to me and my house, etc. When in fact, it doesn't. So those remnants linger on.
Okay. Dr. Smith, are you on a speakerphone by chance? You're coming in.
No, I'm not.
Okay, it's just fading in and out a little bit. That's all. I think I got what you said. I don't know. I think the Second Amendment gives us a guarantee that we have a right to defend ourselves. Do you disagree with that?
The way it's written, absolutely.
How come?
In 21st century America, the people who put that together, they were protecting themselves against what?
Okay, boy, Dr. Hattery, can you hear him? It's just not coming in clear. I think Dr. Hattery, your signal is somehow clear.
I'll get off. Professor Hattery, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of what your question is, what you've been talking about, is just because something becomes illegal doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the country gets on board about it still being okay. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So we have hundreds of years history of that, right? So yes, slavery is no longer legal. Yes, we have integrated schools. Yes, we have all these things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody still gets on board with that or accepts it or sees everybody as equal. So, part of the research that we look at in the book is when police officers, the experiments are done with lots of different people, but, when white people look at black people in experiments and probably in the real world, they don't necessarily see someone who they think has the same rights as they have, right? They tend to see black people as bigger and stronger and meaner, perhaps, than they actually are. And we saw that come out in the case of George Zimmerman, in the case of Mike Brown and Darren Wilson, this perception of black people as big and scary, which I do think is rooted in
I'm
this
bigger
long
and scarier.
history that we have.
I don't. You know what? The problem I have with what you're saying is not complete. I don't disagree with you. However, I disagree with the blanket statement because I don't know that that's true for many white people that I know. I do think it's true for some. And sometimes the some are the people who, for example, are on a jury who's going to acquit somebody like George Zimmerman. That's to me a sin right there. And we really can't make a blanket statement though about anybody.
Well, sure, but the research, you would have to take that up with the psychologists who've done that. But sure.
All right.
100%.
We work in the mall in our area. We have a large window to the outside, and we see a lot of mixed couples and mixed families come by the window, and students come by the window, and they're not all one race, and they just seem to be having the best time ever.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
You see a lot because you assume there's a lot. These mixed race couples or families that you see are minuscule. In fact, we wrote a book about it. They hardly exist in the context of the larger U.S. population, but we think it's a lot because we see them the same way when we see young black men playing basketball at the university. We say, oh, there's a lot of young black men playing basketball. I saw them on TV, and yet they represent less than 2% of the male population at the universities where they play this. But so let me go back about the bigness and the meanness and the big burly black guys. The guy that shot Mike Brown, the police officer that shot Mike Brown, he's the same size as Mike Brown. And yet the people who wrote up the tragedy made it seem like Mike Brown was, 6'9" or something, and 400 pounds.
Yeah, I'm with you. I picked up on that too. Yeah, you're on I hear you. Thank God I can actually hear you. And I understand what you're saying. There might be some parts of our conversation that I'll disagree with, but here's what I do agree with, and it's the bigger part, that we need to work for change. And hopefully we are doing that. Not and legally may not be the answer. It's socially that has to change.
Absolutely, but you can't do that when you have housing covenants. when you have discrimination in
Right.
the job market.
I agree.
When you have resegregation, you're in California, resegregation of the school,
Florida.
school system.
Yeah,
Excuse
yeah.
me, Florida.
That's okay.
You can't do those things if we don't have policies and practices that work in that direction.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen.
Okay, now we're on the
so
same page. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
We're very careful in the book. We don't make outlandish statements. We use good data, and we try to have a serious argument about some of these problems. You cannot tell me of one story, not one, where young white men, unarmed young white men, are being killed by the police. Now, we know of those stories because we've researched them, we've studied them. But the average person walking around your studio that you can see can't tell us about incidents where police are shooting young white men.
Wow.
Go outside
can.
and ask them.
Robert,
Go outside and ask them.
Okay, we can, but
You might be
we
able
do the
to.
news, so that might be the reason for that. All right. Well, I appreciate what you're doing. The signal was a little bit hard, but you got it fixed. Whatever you did, Dr. Smith. Okay, the book is called
sorry about that.
That's okay. Policing Black Bodies. It's getting really good reviews on Amazon. Do you want to give us a website?
www.smithandhattery.com. That's SMITHANDHATTERY.com.
By the way, in the category of minority studies, out of millions of books on Amazon, you guys are 385. That's pretty good. That is really awesome.
Woo, awesome.
Congratulations.
Dr. Angela Hattery and Dr. Earl Smith, thank you both for being on the show, and thank you for what you're doing to make the world a better place.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
You're welcome. All right, we will take a little break. We'll be right back.
Career Source.